Hi, everyone. Heads up, it's Jin Soo Huh. No worries. It's a fun name, but thanks on there. Thanks to Tony and all the organizers for having me. And I told the story right before the pandemic last year, so it was a fun one to revisit. So I hope you all enjoy this one. So I think you really need to read this book, my therapist said. Despite being exhausted from matching the energy of a classroom full of sixth graders all day, I was sitting there interlacing my fingers filled with a nervous energy. I was in my second year out of college, and while I had come out to some friends, I was still struggling with being gay. I was confused by other peers who didn't come out of the closet so much as seemingly strutted regally out, radiating confidence and a secure sense of self. Meanwhile, I was sending pages of emails dissecting gay relationships in the teen television show Degrassi to my close friends, wondering why I wasn't comfortable being gay. So I found myself in this therapist's office in DC. I took my therapist's advice and bought the book. It was a memoir. Like many gay men before me, I found myself reflected in the pages of the book, The Best Little Boy in the World. The memoir is written by a man who coped with his discomfort of being gay by suppressing his sexuality by throwing his energy into academics and extracurriculars. I remember cringing while empathizing far too much with passages like the following. Quote, high school was much the same. I was respected. I had some friends, but evenings I was home writing extra credit reports to keep me on my throne and get me into college of my choice. And another excerpt. Another important line of defense, the most important on a practical day-to-day basis, was my prodigious list of activities. Highly motivated, a self-starter, the teachers would write on my character reports. Hell yes, I was motivated. No one would expect me to be out dating on Saturday nights if the school paper was going to be on the stands on Tuesday. And no one could expect me to be partying over Christmas vacation when I had a list of 17 urgent projects to complete. I would be lucky to find time to open my presents, let alone go to parties or date, for crying out loud. Back to me. In high school, I overloaded on advanced placement classes, and the only negative marks on my report cards were some minus signs next to a few A's. I was editor of the newspaper, captain of the academic decathlon team, secretary general of the Model United Nations Club, but no theater because that was for white people and wouldn't look as good on my college application, according to my parents. I racked up awards and accolades, and as you can probably tell, I was really super cool in high school. So I remember thinking if I ever were to come out to my parents, I would have these accomplishments at the ready, as if to say, I may be gay, but remember all these great things that I did. College was more of the same. I was a tour guide, student ambassador, co-ran orientation, and was once again Secretary General of the Model UN Club. Even as an adult, I keep a full agenda of activities. Up until recently, I was on 5 boards for my alma mater. I still run communities of practices, write a column, volunteer locally, and pre-pandemic organize outings with my friends. And I'm overall a happy, optimistic person, so I bring a lot of energy and a smile to these activities. This mindset was only exacerbated by growing up in an Asian household where from a young age, getting into a top 10 school was set as an expectation. And my mother shared her dreams of me becoming a doctor who would marry a nice Korean girl and have cute, chubby Korean grandbabies. Well, as you heard in the intro, I didn't become a doctor. I entered the extremely lucrative field of education instead and joined Teach for America upon graduation. Teach for America is a program that places people as teachers in schools in high poverty areas for 2 years. And I'm sure you can imagine how thrilled my parents were. My parents had abandoned their dreams of me becoming a doctor, but held out hope that I'd become a lawyer. And when I told my parents that I was going to become a teacher, my mom stoically responded that they would support me in whatever decision I made. But that didn't stop her from emailing me law fellowships for the remainder of my senior year, including on the morning of my graduation. She often just called me to ask me if I would just consider applying. When I told her that I had no plans on taking the LSAT, which was a requirement, she responded hopefully and with a bit of delusion, surely they would make an exception for you, no? Teaching was the perfect field for me. I really liked teaching math. And yes, I didn't become a doctor or lawyer, but did find another way to fulfill a stereotype. I honestly can talk to you for hours about the beauty and importance of sixth grade math. And like, don't get me started on deriving the formula for the area of a circle because it's actually mind blowing. And there's always something really magical about seeing a student grasp a concept like dividing fractions after struggling with it. And I was good at teaching, and my students' test scores reflected that. I also really enjoyed working with students. Sixth graders were especially hilarious because they still wanted to impress you as the teacher, but were starting to understand sarcasm and develop their own sense of humor and spiciness. For instance, one of my more opinionated students told me it looked like I had put on some weight. The mortified look on her peers' faces caused her to quickly backtrack and say, "Oh, no, 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 I'm sorry. I just meant that you're like juicier." Yeah, I started a diet that night. Kids are pretty honest. It was also hilarious to see these tall girls towering over these boys who they had crushes on, while the boys still thought the girls had cooties. And naturally, I knew all about who liked who based on intercepting notes and eavesdropping on conversations. But perhaps even more importantly, teaching was the perfect profession for me because there's always more that can be done. Ask any teacher. You can make an extra bulletin board. You can grade another test. You can create a more interactive lesson. The list is never ending. And so I dove in. And what were people going to say? He was caring too much about his students? I wore it like a badge of honor. And of course, it helped that it allowed me to deflect questions about dating and my sexuality. Gradually, through the support of friends and my therapist, I became more comfortable being gay. That proverbial weight was lifted. Friendships deepened as I was not guarding a part of myself. I told my parents, and we still practice a bit of a don't ask, don't tell policy, and I know they were a bit disappointed. I mean, after all, I first go into education, then I come out as gay. I seriously diminished their chances of cute Korean grandbabies. But I know they love me through my dad calling to chat about college basketball and my mom texting me to bundle up when the weather gets cold, which is easy from their home in California. So I'll take it. It wasn't until I moved to Chicago about 8 years ago that I felt truly comfortable. Showtune Sunday, boozy slushies, and dance floors with pulsating music at the bars on Halstead Street helped facilitate this. And as I became more comfortable, I began to elevate other priorities other than career. More nights out popped up on my calendar. I bought a gym membership for the first time. I started going on dates. I got hit on for the first time. But side note, too often this happens due to someone having an Asian fetish, but that's a rant for another time. Being driven had become hardwired into who I was, but I also wondered how much of it was because that was who I truly was, and how much of it was because I had been compensating. I was and still am a bit perplexed by people who are driven and successful without seeming like they need to compensate for something. Like, what drives them? I still care deeply about my career and the overall cause of education, though, so I kept pushing. But I eased the pressure on the gas a bit. And part of this was just due to growing older. As I entered my 30s, pulling all-nighters multiple times a week was fading as an option. I started understanding the law of diminishing returns and that really good enough at work was sometimes okay. Plus, even with a few nights out a week, my career was still on the right path. Then I started to suffer some setbacks. After working for the central office, I decided to return to the classroom. And despite people saying experience helped, my fifth and final year of teaching was the worst year of teaching I ever had. From there, I bounced around the country to work for the central office for school networks. At one, I butted heads with an executive director. And at my most recent school role, I thought things were going really well when I was suddenly laid off in July of 2019. Prior to my layoff, I had been abruptly called into a meeting with the CEO. I had just had my performance evaluations a few weeks ago, which really went well, and ended with my manager hugging me and her saying that she hoped she knew how much she loved having me on her team. After some pleasantries, the CEO said, "I'm just going to come out and say it. You have a perception issue in the organization. You're always snacking, never in schools, and always lying down." He then said, "Well, if a principal sees on your social media that you're out on a weekday at a bar and they just worked a 12-hour day, that might not sit well with them." I noted that I likely worked a 12-hour day that day, was always one of the first people at work in the morning, and was never late to a meeting, and had a strong performance evaluation. He said, "Oh, no, no, no. It has nothing to do with performance. It's a perception issue." I documented the conversation and sent the meeting notes to my manager on Wednesday. and was at a conference on Thursday and Friday. The following Monday, the legal counsel and director of HR called me into their office and told me that unfortunately, due to financial issues, they had to eliminate my role. When I asked if it was performance-based, they said it had nothing to do with that, and they would keep me if they had the funds. Never mind that budgets were due months ago, and my position was the only one eliminated. I always thought if I was going to get fired, it would be due to a professional mistake I made. Instead, I found myself handing in my keys and computer and being walked out of the building. It was later confirmed that the CEO was infuriated by the meeting notes, which led to my abrupt departure. My career and trajectory had been such a central part of my identity, so these setbacks rattled me. I had spent most of my life trying to be the best little boy in the world, and I couldn't help but wonder if now that I was more comfortable with being gay, did that negatively affect my drive? Like, is being comfortable being gay and being driven some 6-0-sum game? And was I not working as hard because I didn't feel the need to compensate for something? And look, I know it's ridiculous. There are plenty of people out there who manage to find balance. Although again, I'm still somewhat baffled by what drives them, if it's not at least in some small part compensating for something. But sometimes a thought creeps back into my mind and I can't help but wonder if it's true. I did some independent consulting and ended up taking a job with one of my clients after much debate. And you can probably imagine that I have some trust issues. For so long, I had worked hard to succeed in order to compensate my feelings of shame around being gay. Then I loosened up a little and questioned if my motivation had just come from hiding. I dropped every board duty for my alma mater when I realized a lot of my motivation just stemmed from inertia. I had been doing similar things in college, so I had just continued it. It didn't stem from a fervent belief in the mission or joy from my time on it. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about what it is that I want to chase because I truly want it. Or at the very least, I want to know what it is. I have found passion in causes like LGBTQ rights and Asian American issues and in education, which is helping things be a little less fuzzy. I still am sprinting, but it feels like it's more out of habit and I'm not necessarily pursuing a clear target. Perhaps my true drive will come from a sense of duty, love, a desire for riches, probably a desire to make an impact, but who knows? But what I do know is that I'm not trying to be the best little boy in the world anymore. I'm not trying to rack up activities on my calendar only to suppress something. And I'm not doing something because it's someone else's expectation. I'm not trying to be my parents' version of the best little boy in the world. I'm trying to find balance and embracing all dimensions of my identity and being okay with just being good enough and throwing in some fun for good measure. I'm not trying to be the best little boy in the world anymore. I'm just trying to be happy. Thank you.